What's up guys, welcome to another video, and today we're going to look at the Dark Beast, the last one that I have to cover. And I believe this is probably one of the harder ones, if not the hardest. So I sort of left it to last because I was still sort of figuring out a good team for it. I still haven't gotten a 100% team, but I'll go through the mechanics of the fight and discuss what you should be looking for your team. Right, so first off, the special ability of this boss is he'll attack all your team, right, and then he'll imprison one of your units in the front line, right. So it's only used on the front line, but it's random, right. So he'll imprison one unit. So think of it like similar to the Necro boss. He sort of like steals that unit, and the unit doesn't do anything, right. And it'll be coming up here in a second. So yeah, there's Dark Roar there. He just imprisoned my Shaolin. Okay, so there's a counter there. You see that there's like a number on top of her head. So that's the number of multi-hits that you need to do to release her from imprisonment. Right. So the proper way would be to bring a bunch of multi-hitters while still covering all the the essential stuff like defense break, attack buff, preferably having branding on your team too, and yeah, then also you need to cover heals with at least one. Probably you need one healer. So something like a Hua He or Colleen is a pretty good option. And then yes, so that's the general idea, is to try to release the unit from the imprisonment as soon as possible before he does the Fawn of Despair. So this Fawn of Despair is an ability that all rapists have, and it will do damage scaling with defense, right? So the reason why you want to release him, or the unit, before this goes off is because if all of the damage goes on to one unit, it does a lot of damage, right? If your units aren't tanky enough, they might get one shot. Alright, so that's why you want to try to get them out as soon as possible. Also because eventually if you don't have enough multi-hit, multiple units will get imprisoned as well. So if you get 2 units imprisoned in the front line and he does Fawn of Despair, then that's gonna probably wipe your back line, right, if that happens. So yeah, that's the strategy, I guess, Com2uS intended for us to do. Previously, it required a lot more hits to release a unit from imprisonment, but they reduced that. But even after they reduced it, I feel that it's still a bit too much. I tried running a bunch of multi-hits in my team, but it's still, well, for one, I mean, it still will win sometimes, but not that consistently. And also, even if I beat it, I don't do a lot of damage because a lot of the multi-hitters have very bad single target damage, right? I even tried using 2 Lich. Lich generally has pretty decent single target damage, but it still only give me like S at best usually if I pass it. So the alternative way to do this fight is to bring lots of single target DPS and ignore the multi-hits, right? So you can see in my team, it's a lot of single target damage. Fuel Mask, Fire Homunculus built. The Fire Homunculus is built speed based, right? So it's like similar to having like a Squall Chimera, right? All of the abilities scale of speed, like his own speed, and a couple abilities scale with the opponent's speed. So yeah, that does a lot of good single target damage. So I'm trying to kill the boss as soon as possible after on the last stage after the second Groggy, right? So I want to kill him before he imprisons 2 units preferably, and therefore I usually will barely pass it. So usually he'll wipe most of my team, and usually it's only the Fuel Mask and the Homunculus left standing because of their passives. So they have one last chance to finish the boss off before he kills the rest off. Another thing to keep note is the third ability, Dark Sweep. So a lot of the Raid Beasts have this Dark Sweep ability, and this ability means that he'll gain a turn counter whenever one of your units has a turn. So similar to those raid beasts, this damage, the damage on this ability will scale based on the number of turns you have, and therefore, violent runes are not very good for this, right? Because of you don't want to take too much damage from this, right? And that's very awkward because you kind of need the violent to help get the multi-hits in, and then the downside is, like, when he does that ability, you take a lot of damage. If you manage to take out, like, to release your imprisoned unit before that happens, then it's not as bad, because I believe the damage gets spread out amongst all 6 units as opposed to 5. But still, you don't want that to go up too high, right? So so I guess that there's a few things to keep in mind. First off, you have to decide whether you're going to go for multi-hits or just go YOLO single target burst damage, right? And then thirdly, how many violent units are you going to put in your team? If you don't expect to actually kill the boss, right? What you can do is a combination of this, like the second and third choice is just run violent anyway, right? And second of all, just try to do as much damage to the boss as possible during the first 2 groggy stages, and just give up on the 3rd stage, right? It's a reasonable strategy. You're basically aiming to guarantee yourself A+, right? So like, even though you're just getting A+, it's still respectable. Like, you get your materials at a decent rate. But if you really want to farm, like, the runes that require Dark Essence, you probably want to find a team that will kill the boss reasonably consistently. You may not do it all the time, but most of the time you should, as long as you can do it like most of your runs, that's good enough, right? Because obviously the higher the rank, the more materials you get, and it means, 1, you can farm your materials faster, right? And 2, it's more efficient on your energy, right? Anything less than A+, I don't feel it's really worth farming these beasts. And I think that's the biggest downside to these beasts anyway, is that it's really only suitable to very high-end players. So I don't know, like, I mean, I want to provide this information for everyone, like, no matter how new you are. I guess it's still good to know, like, the mechanics of the boss and whether it's worth farming for you. Right, so I want to show you the runes afterwards, so you know, like, what sort of stats I'm using on my team, and whether, you know, you can reach something similar. Keep in mind also that my glory point buildings are all maxed. Also, one other thing I forgot is, when he imprisons a unit and he switches to the groggy stage, the unit that's imprisoned is automatically released. Right, so you don't have to worry about that for the first 2 phases. Yeah, you'll still, you know, you have that unit for the groggy stage to do the damage that you need. So I guess that's another reason why you don't necessarily need to use the multi-hits or that method. But it might be a safer run. It just depends on what units you have as well. But people who have things like Perna, you probably prefer just to go YOLO and kill a boss as soon as possible, since you have a lot of burst damage from Perna itself, and also the attack power lead. I'm not so fortunate. I have to use the Field Mars lead, which is inefficient, because I ruin my units generally towards 85% crit rate or 100%. But that's like the only leader I have at the moment that's ruined anyway. That's useful for this dungeon. Alright, so for the runes, so this is my Trevor. This is typical vampire sort of build. The reason I have that is like, because of other raid bosses, more specifically the light one, and I believe the wind one as well. So the vampire is there so that he can leech back life once he's going to take damage for sure, right? So he'll activate Brawler's Will very easily, and that means he does a lot of burst damage. And when he does that, he pretty much heals himself for full health, especially if you're using the second skill. The first skill not so much, but the second skill definitely, if he activates that, he'll heal himself for a big chunk of health. But he still works for this because he's going to have to tank a bit of damage if he's not the one that's in prison. So if Shaolin gets in prison, then he's going to take the Fawn of Despair, and after he takes that, as long as he survives, he'll do a big chunk of damage to the boss and heal himself up at least for like half his health or something, and then Hua-Hei can like complete the healing, you know, the rest, heal up the rest of his health, right? This is my Shaolin. Shaolin, same idea as Trevor. She's there to tank the Fawn of Despair, obviously, and then heal herself back up with her own abilities, right? Especially her third skill, she does it. And it's typical Vampire Revenge. Also, it's very useful for like other areas too. I think Vampire is a good universal set to give her, but you can give her any set you want. Right? It doesn't have to be Vampire, but Vampire is pretty good. Like if you don't have a unit that you want to give your Vampire runes to, you consider these sort of units who have really good burst damage and can heal themselves up. Okay, and this is my Filmars. So Filmars is there for the single target damage. He also provides armor break. Also, I should mention Shaolin also provides armor break on her first skill. And it doesn't matter that Shaolin's first ability is only one turn, because Groggy Stage is only one turn anyway. Well, like he gets a debuff, and then once he gets his turn, like everything goes away anyway. But this is my like PvP sort of build for Filmars, but it works for this. Like you can use any build of Filmars, you know, that you like. Typically, people will build in Violet for PvP, but if you don't have the Violent runes yet, you can give him like any other DPS set. You know, Fatal, Swift, anything will work, even broken sets. Okay, and it's nice that he provides defense break on skill 2 as well. So having as many defense breaks as possible means that on turn 1, hopefully at least one of the units will, like early in the like Groggy Stage, hopefully at least one of your units will defense break, and therefore the rest of your team can do, you know, the maximum damage they can. Okay, this is my Homunculus. So this Homunculus is pretty good for the like most of these raids, right? Actually, especially the fire one, which this one has burn soul. So this is the speed scaling one, right? That's single target damage scales with speed of both you and the opponent. Second one is Flaming Magic Bullet. I got it the wrong way around. So this one's a defense break, which is quite nice. It also decreases speed. I'm not entirely sure whether that really affects Groggy that much or not, but I mean it's a nice bonus effect. But it does a lot of damage, really good burst, and it's a defense break. So you know, you try to get as much defense break as you can. If you can't get defense break, then put like get the branding one, if you can. And the first ability, just a standard sort of skill. It's nice that this scales with attack speed, so it does like this slightly I would say slightly less than a Filmars would do on the first skill, but it's still pretty nice. The continuous damage has no effect on this boss, but yeah, it's still pretty decent damage for a first skill. And these are the runes. It's on pretty much just broken sets. Because in PvP, I would generally assume that he is going to go first. I'm going to bring in against teams where I know I'll be outspeeding the opponent with a Bernard sort of something. So that's why he's built that way. But this has been working in a lot of these rifts. So I'll use it in this one. I use it in the fire one, and I think I use it in the wind one as well. It's also decent in the light one too, because it's good single target. It's a single target burst build. Alright, and this is my Tark. So Tark, he's on Blade just to get him the crit rate that I need, and I gave him a fight set for DB10 and just general use. Alright, so like fight runes are good for this if you can give it to them, but raid beasts are not really like that priority for me at the moment. I prioritize the fight runes to my raid team and my like dungeon farming teams, which I do more than these raids typically anyway. But these are his runes. He's just like standard attacker build. You don't need to give him like super high speed, because you don't actually want him to move first. You want him to move after like most of your main nukas. That way, when he does group hunt, he'll reduce the cooldown on whatever unit he brings. So you want other units to use their cooldowns first, and then he'll help refresh it, right? So don't automatically give him space slot 2. You might think it's good for him, but I actually prefer to give him more burst damage and a decent amount of speed from substats. So that's why I use attack slot 2. Alright, and this is Hua He. So Hua He, I use her for as the healer for all of these raids except for the water one, which is where she's weak against, obviously. So yeah, she's a pretty good universal unit. Also useful for Necro. So if you have one and you can skill her up to, you have to max their Muse ability, right? If you have enough to max the Muse, then she's worth using, worth building. Alternatively, if you do not have a Hua He or you can't get the skill ups to build her, you can just use a Colleen, and that will work just fine. But I would recommend make sure you put Colleen in the back line. Otherwise, if you put her in the front line and she gets stolen, it's a bit awkward because she's not healing your team, right? If your team takes AoE, she can't help you recover, and she also can't attack buff for you as well if she's in the front line, right? If she gets stolen, you want her in the back so that she can keep the attack buff up, so you can do as much damage as you can during the non-groggy stage. Because you want the attack buff, because that's the only thing that's going to increase your damage output against the boss, apart from ignore defense abilities, right? So units that you can use, like there's heaps of alternatives, right? Because it's a dark boss. Like you're not limited to any particular element, right? So good units to use is like first off, Tark is farmable, right? There's no excuse for not having a Tark. It's very easy to obtain, and he's pretty good for this because of group hunt. So especially if you're running a lot of multi-hits, then consider using Tark so that you can group hunt and add extra multi-hits from those units, okay? So if you're running a lot of good skill 1, like triple multi-hits, then yeah, bring Tark for that. Alternatively, you can also try like Ralk or even both of them. So Ralk does multi-hits on the first ability, right? It's a RNG based one, but he can do it. It's also a defense break, which is like pretty nice. Not 100% reliable, but it's still pretty decent. And he also has a team up as well, so similar to Tark, if he teams up with a unit, he's at least guaranteeing you a little bit of multi-hits. If he teams up with, say, Tark instead, it's still 2 hits, right? 1 from each, and you're helping Tark do group hunt more often as well. So pretty much the only unit that you don't really want him to team up with is maybe Hua He. But if you're using Colleen, it's even better because Colleen at least has a double hit, and therefore that's a pretty easy way to get multi hits on the boss. Alright, so other multi hitters you can use. There's or the Lich, right? Preferably the water one, the wind one, or the dark one are probably the best ones for the raids, okay? And that's because on the second skill they got defense break, which is pretty nice. All right, and yeah, the first skill is multi-hit 2 or 3 times. Again, this is slow on this, which might be good for the groggy stage, but I haven't really paid attention too closely to it. But it's never a bad thing to have. I mean, at worst, it's just like a potential triple hit on that, right? He also has pretty good survivability, so you can potentially put him in the front line if you give him some decent defense substats, right? So he's an option to put in the front line. Same for Fuko, like Fuko's same idea, because Fuko's also he's a HP type, so he has more HP, more survivability, and he still has the same like multi-hit kit as Rigel. Same thing for Gregor. You can put him on the front line. And yeah, all of them do pretty reasonable damage, right? And of course, the extra defense break chances on the groggy stage is quite nice. Let's see. You could use this guy, the panda. So he's a potential frontliner. So he could be like an alternative to, say, Trevor, because he'll survive a lot easier than Trevor, right? He's naturally very tanky, and you'll probably build him towards being like defense based anyway. He also has multi-hits on the first skill and his third ability, right? So it's either a triple hit or a quad hit. And he also does defense break on the first skill, which is quite nice, right? And worst case scenario, if you don't have any other leader's skills, you can use his defense leader, okay? It's not the worst, it helps you survive longer. Of course, if you're trying to YOLO and do as much damage as you can to the boss to get A+, then you may not use that. But it's an alternative option if you have nothing else. Kung Fu girls in general are pretty good for this, so you don't have to only use Shaolin. You can also use like the other ones. I would say generally prefer to only build either the water one, the dark one, or the light one. Right? You can build the fire and the wind ones. They're not bad, but they're just like not as good as the other ones. That you since like you don't really want to run like too many Kung Fu girls, right? It's very hard to get skill ups for all of them, unless you're like pay to play. Then you probably won't have to have that many, and I wouldn't recommend trying to fuse skill ups. It takes a long time. I mean, you can do it, but you just keep in mind the amount of time and crystals you're putting into that could be used to farm runes instead, right? Let's see. I think those are like the things that I have in my box that are alternative multi-hitters, but instead you can also do just single target burst damage. So things like Tashar are really good for this too. Tashar, I haven't tried Sigmaris, but he could be potentially useful because he's got decent single target burst. Obviously Pernas is even better. Pernas is even better because he's got attack power lead, which is a good universal lead. But Tashar also has crit lead, so if you build your units towards like having that crit lead, then you could get a lot of damage out of your units as well that way, right? So if you just scale like sort of build them towards around 67% crit rate, then they'll always crit with this ability, right? And therefore the sub stats that you would have used to get crit rate on can instead be attack power or crit damage, or just like stacking that onto your unit, and they'll do like similar sort of damage to having like a Perna lead instead. Just depends how you build your units, though, because you have to keep in mind, if you build it towards 30 crit rate, those units are only good when you actually have a crit rate leader, right? So typically for dungeons or these raid beasts, those units would be good at. But if you want to build a specialized unit for these raids and you run a crit lead for it, then by all means it will be pretty good if you can you can optimize it towards that way. As I said before, if you don't have Hua He, you can use Colleen as well. Same sort of like idea. She's got the heals, attack buff, right, on one skill as well, and multi-hits on the first and second ability. Actually, I don't think this one does. I can't remember if this one does multi-hits, but anyway, she has multi-hits. She's got attack power buff, 3 turns on a 3 turn cooldown, which is really nice, and heals, right? So yeah, then the alternative is to bring a lot of single target DPS, so things like the Homunculus, Tashar, Teo, Lagmaron, those sort of units. Even like the magical arch is also really good, like Bethany, maybe Ardella. I haven't tried it, but you can try it. She could be a frontliner as well. Similar, you just have to build a similar to like Trevor and Charlene. Give them decent defense and HP, and then like attack, crit damage, attack type builds. And I believe that's pretty much it. I guess like other things you can try to do is run ignore defense units, which I haven't actually built yet, but it's like worth a try. For example, Kali, the water version of Kali, or something like Yaku. I haven't tried it yet, but I'll probably will try it. The reason why ignore defense would be nice is because of the last stage, right? If you're trying to YOLO the boss, kill the boss as soon as possible before he imprisons too many units, then ignore defense would be pretty nice for that, because since you can't actually defense break the boss, then you can actually get a lot of damage out of running ignore defense. But that's something I'll be testing. We'll see maybe in a future video if I come to revisit these with like better strats or better teams that I've built. Right, so that's it for me today. If you have any questions about the Dark Beast or any other raid beast, let me know in comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So thanks again for watching, guys. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.